How y'all doing? I'm Joshua Wiley, and this right here is part 3. Part 3 on Scream, All Watchmen, Scream. Now, in this series that we've been doing, Scream, All Watchmen, we've been going over Isaiah chapter 21. Isaiah chapter 21. And like I said with the end, at the end of part 2, I stated how Isaiah chapter 21 is actually a detailed chapter of Isaiah 13. Now, Isaiah 13 is talking about the punishment of Babylon. The punishment of Babylon. Now, God will state things many ways, and they can mean way more than one thing. That's the beauty of the Bible. That's the beauty of the Bible. So I'm not saying that Isaiah chapter 21 is only about Babylon, but it is about the fall of Babylon. You get what I'm saying? Definitely in symbolism. But I'm going to get right into it because there's so much to share. We left off, and again, I'm in Isaiah chapter 21, and I left off at verse 7. Now, I'm going to just go back up to verse 6 to lead into 7. Now, it says, "For thus hath the Lord said unto me, Go, set a watchman, let him declare what he seeth." Now I'm going to deal heavy on the watchman. And a lot of you know, I call myself a watchman. Well, the watchman. And there are many watchmen. You know, matter of fact, if you are a Christian and you love the Lord, you are a watchman. It is no maybe or that's not. I'm not in the church to do that. No, you are called to stand on the tower and watch for the enemy and warn. You are called. You are called. What's sad is many watchmen are asleep, but I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that. And this is talking about the fall of Babylon. Now, we know this chapter is basically talking about referring to our day and time. And we're going to be going to the second angel's message in Revelation 14, Revelation chapter 14, where you find the second angel's message. I believe it's verse 8. Don't quote me on that. I believe it's verse 8 where it says Babylon is fallen, and it states that first right here in this chapter. And that's how beautiful God is to actually let us know what he's talking about. So really this chapter is about the second angel's message. The second angel's message to us in our time. As we know, God said in the last days his people would be in Babylon. And he's calling us out of Babylon. And we're to call our brothers, and once we get out of Babylon, we're to call our brothers and sisters out and to help lead them out. And to help lead them out. That is our duty. That is our duty, and that's what we're called to do. But let's get to it. Verse 6, it says, "For thus hath the Lord said unto me, Go, set a watchman, let him declare what he seeth." Now, in the last one, I talked about trusting your eyes. You have to, you can't look at this world blind. Some people actually walk around blind, look at this world blindly like there's nothing going on, or there's just a little sin. Beloved, let's not get it twisted. We're living in the worst time in history for all of mankind. We have so many different sins on so many different levels. It is unfathomable, unheard of. Right now, through the internet and through our TVs, we can bring all the worlds into our homes and in our living rooms right now. If I want to see let me tell you what, let me explain a little bit more what I'm saying. Back in the day, say even before the internet, when it was just, let's go back to black and white TVs. I couldn't just, if I didn't want my children to know what Babylon or Mardi Gras was about, the only way they would know is from some pictures or if somebody told them. Now I know this ain't nothing but the devil, because my birds was quiet they've been quiet all morning. But the minute I start recording, they want to get loud. Look, now they stop because I'm just about to get up and go put the blanket on. Let's try it. But anyway, if a man wanted to keep the world out of his house, he could. But now, with the internet, it is almost impossible for someone to keep the world out of their house. The only way to do that is to not have the world in your house. It's to not have the internet at all. It's to not have the internet at all. And so the sins, there are a million different types of drugs to take, million different type of pills. Like I say, we got instant everything at our disposal with the internet. We are living in the worst time in mankind, you know, in history. What is bad has become good, and what is good is seen as bad. And the first thing God says is you have to put a watchman. You have to set watch over your life, over your home, over your friends and family, over your church. And you have to, what it says, and let him declare what he seeth. Call it out. Don't be a sleeping watchman. Don't be sleep or occupied or distracted watchman. You're just as bad as the enemy. You're just as bad as the enemy, a sleeping watchman or a distracted watchman. Verse 7, and he saw, and this is what the watchman saw, and he saw a chariot with a couple of horsemen, a chariot of asses, and a chariot of camels. And he hearkened diligently with much heed. And he hearkened diligently with much heed. So the watchman is actually crying out, doing what he's supposed to do. And he cried a lion. Now, before I get into that, because the birds can be a distraction, let me do something about that. Hold on. I ain't want no distractions. I didn't want no distractions, but now I'm at the speed up. That took a little bit of time off. Alright, now I'm at the speed up. But anyway, verse 8. And this is the watchman cried, and he cried a lion. Now why would the Bible say that? Who is described as a lion? Who does the Bible say walks around as a lion? It doesn't say that he is a lion, but it says he walks around as a lion. We're talking about the devil. So God is telling us in simple words, the watchman sees the devil. He sees the devil. But what's the one thing about a lion? This is why this is one of the reasons why God says the devil walks around as a lion. What's the one thing about a lion? Who does the hunting for a lion? That's right, the females. Now I ain't talking about all women and things of that nature. What I'm saying is that the devil uses other people and other means to do his hunting for him. Hunting for him. Now, because women can be just a tool of the devil just as much as men can be just as much a tool of the devil for women. So what it's also saying here is that the devil uses other people, places, and things to do his hunting for him, like a lion. That's just one aspect of it. And look, and then he says, verse 8, my Lord, I stand continually upon the watchtower in the daytime, and I am set in my ward whole nights. Meaning he's on his job. He's not slacking. And he says, I see a lion. I see the enemy. I see Satan. And behold, here cometh a chariot of men with a couple of horsemen. Remember what I said, how lions hunt? He says, a chariot of men with a couple of horsemen. And he answered, I skipped one. Oh, no, I didn't. And he answered and said, now right here in verse 9, he says, and behold, here cometh a chariot of men and a couple of horsemen. But remember, if you go back up to verse 7, he says, and he saw a chariot with a couple of horsemen, a chariot of asses, and a chariot of camels. All of these represent different lifestyles, because each ones are different animals, different beasts, different lifestyles, different kingdoms, different ethnicities. Hope I said that right. But different kingdoms, different lifestyles, different kingdom, different people, different ethnics that the devil is using to attack God's people. The devil is using, like I said, a lion hunts through different places, people, and things. Okay, back to verse 9. And behold, here cometh a chariot of men with a couple of horsemen. And he answered and said, Babylon is fallen is fallen. Like I said, this is the second angel's message. And all the graven images of her gods he hath broken unto the ground. He hath broken unto the ground. Beloved, there are so many gods we have today. Like I just named a couple earlier with all the vices. Believe it or not, the internet is people's god. The internet is some people's god. Money is a god. Cars can be a god. Clothes can be a god. Material things can be God. Other people can be a god. And why does God say graven images specifically with Babylon? Beloved, there are so many. When people will stand in line, will camp out for a day and a half for some sneakers, but can't listen to a 30-minute Bible study or a sermon. Those sneakers are more of a god to that person than God is, than the living God. And that is the truth. Some people might say, nah, that ain't really true. Your actions, I rarely believe what people say. I'm always checking actions. That's what your actions say. Your words might say something different. Like, I love the Lord, but your actions really tell who you love. Your actions is what really tells who you love. Who you love. Verse 10, O my threshing, and the corn of my floor, that which I have heard of the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, have I declared unto you. God right now is worried about the harvest. You see, oh my threshing and the corn of my floor. God is worried about the harvest, those who are fallen with Babylon, that grain that didn't get put, but remember, when you go back to Revelation, there are two bundles. There are two different things, grains. You have the harvest of the righteous, and you have the harvest of the wicked, who will be burned in bundles. Let's go look at it real quick. Go to Revelation 14. Revelation 14, the same chapter. Yep, I was right. Verse 8 is where it says, and there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, is fallen. But let's go to the harvest of the wicked. The harvest of the wicked is verse 18 of that same chapter. And another angel came out from the altar, which had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And that's how you know it's dealing with the wicked, because it was talking about, that's the harvest of the wicked getting cast into the great winepress. So right here, God is screaming out, oh my threshing and the corn of my floor, the harvest that has fallen by the way, and the harvest that has fallen by the way. God does not see any pleasure in the wicked perishing. The devil wants to paint God as some tyrant, but it breaks his heart. It breaks his heart when we sin. And I'm really starting to get that he who loved me when nobody else loved me is hurt when I even do the slightest thing. Verse 11, the burden of Duma, he calleth to me out of Seir. Watchman, what of the night? Watchman, what of the night? The watchman said, the morning cometh, and also the night. If ye will inquire ye, return come. He's basically saying people are worried about the night. Okay, that's the obvious. And that's what the Watchman is saying. That's the obvious. Right here now, he's saying people are worried about Watchmen. What about the night? They're worried about the big sins. Pornography and murder and killing. They're worried about adultery. They're worried about the big sins. But what about the little sins? The Watchman saying, yeah, the night coming. But what about the day? The day also coming. What about the sins that don't appear as sins? What about the sins that we start to look at as sins like our temperament and being impatient? What about those sins? What about the way we talk to our children or talk to each other? The selfishness in our lifestyle. What about the little traits in our character that we know we need to get rid of? What about lusting looking at the opposite sex the wrong way. If y'all notice the camera angle change, it's because my camera died, so I had to plug it in and do a little adjusting. But anyway, the people are screaming out, "Watchmen, what about the night?" You know, obvious evils come in the night. It's the daytime. The sins that we say is okay are the ones that we're gonna have to worry about. And I believe that's what God is saying here. That what about the day? What about the sins that we seem is okay? The second looks. Like I've said many times on here, the lusting that I myself have problems with, and if I don't catch myself, you know, the dwelling too long, looking at the wrong thing or the wrong person. What about those sins? God is saying. He's saying, yeah, you got the night, but what about the day? What about the day? And basically when he says, if you will inquire. If you want to know about the enemy, then learn about the enemy. Don't pick and choose, you know, don't put a hierarchy on sin like we often like to do. You know, people who are very judgmental put a hierarchy on sin, and that's prevalent in the churches. You know, we'll talk about the little girl, you know, people in the church, they'll talk about the little girl who got pregnant out of wedlock. Yeah, that's obvious. That's obvious. But what about the sarcastic way you talk to your wife? What about the not spending no hours, no time with your children? We will all be held accountable for these things. There is no difference in those things than what God, who says there's a difference? You know, then those obvious, yeah. They talk about the little boy who, the teenager or the young man who got locked up. Yeah, they talk about him, you know. But what about the member in the church who's backbiting, who can't stop gossiping? You know, what about the members or the elders who've been in the church 5 years and never brought one soul into the church? What about the members who never go out and witness about God? You know, all they do is come to church, eat potluck, and go home. You know, read their word. They might sit around, discuss a little something, even go to a Bible study inside the church, but is not doing any witnessing at all, which a lot of Christians aren't. They're relying on the pastor. What about those? What about those sins? If you're gonna, what God says, if you will inquire. Listen for the whole truth. Verse 13, the burden upon Arabia, in the forests of Arabia shall ye lodge, O ye traveling companies of the Dedanim. The inhabitants of the land of Tema brought water to him that was thirsty. They prevented him with their bread, him that fled. Now I'm gonna stop right here. It's a shame if others have to get fed from some outside source. God has equipped you with a storehouse of food. And it's a shame if people in the world have to go to other churches, other people in the workplace, even in your home, just to get some good food. You know, and it's one thing to know the Bible, but do you have understanding of the Bible? Are you showing the Bible the beauty of God in love? Sometimes we can know the Bible truth up and down, but the people we live with in our homes or work with won't listen to it because we're not friendly. We don't know how to love. You know, we're critical, harsh, but we know the Bible though. But guess what? They're gonna go to an outside source to get fed and to try to get some thirst and try to get the Holy Spirit. Why? Because you're not feeding them properly. You're not feeding them properly. So it's one thing to know the Bible, but are you showing the beauty of the Bible? Are you putting the Bible in use in your life? Now let's put some of these things together, what we've read so far. When you're not being honest about the enemy and how Satan attacks, and when you don't see the many different forms and people and ways that he comes into your life, he will use you against yourself. He will not only use you against yourself, but he will use you against those you love. He will use you against those in your church, in your home, those who you work with. When you don't recognize, when you don't have faith in what you see, or when you're not honest with what's really going on around you, when you're only concerned about the big sins. What of the night, Watchman? What of the night? But you're not looking at the enemy who's coming to you by day. I want to read you something. We're all called to be watchmen. We are all called to be watchmen. Look what God said how our watchmen to be in these last days. Isaiah 56 verse 10 says, his watchmen are blind. They are all ignorant. They are all dumb dogs. That means mute. They cannot bark, sleeping, lying down, loving to slumber. We are not on our jobs. And then, like he says, they're dumb dogs, meaning they're mute, meaning that we see the apostasy going on in the church. We see these things taking place, but we stay quiet. We stay quiet, but we got the nerve to talk about the young cat with his pants sagging, or the young girl with a skirt too high. But you see other things going on in the church and you keep quiet. Who are you? For your sin is no different from theirs. Your sin is no different from theirs. You know, I want to read this. And this is what made me one of my nicknames, the Watchman. When I read this, when I came back into the church, when I strayed and came back into the church 5 years ago, I read Ezekiel 33 one day. And it always stuck with me. Ezekiel 33, 1 through 9 says, again the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, speak to the children of thy people, and say unto them, when I bring the sword upon a land, if the people of the land take a man of their coasts and set him for their watchman, if, when he seeth the sword come upon the land, he blow the trumpet and warn the people, then whosoever heareth the sound of the trumpet and taketh not the warning, if the sword come and take them away, his blood shall be on his own head. But he heard, his blood shall be on his own head. He heard the sound of the trumpet and took not warning. His blood shall be upon him. But he that taketh warning shall deliver his soul. But if the watchman see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. And beloved, if you say you're a Christian and you love the Lord, you are a watchman. And you see God says right there, if we see the enemy approaching and we say nothing, we don't even at least give a warning. And I'm not talking about going out here like, hey, rebuking, pointing the finger. I'm talking about out of love, real love, praying for tact from the Holy Spirit. How should I approach this? Remembering that you yourself is a sinner. If you always remember that you are filthy and unworthy of God's love, do you know that changes how you will talk to somebody else about their sins? Because you can't point your finger and condemn when you dirty and filthy is just the person you pointing at. That makes no sense, does it? But we do. You know, if you keep your filthiness before your eyes, as David did, you know, it's hard for you to criticize someone else. See, the watchman that warns out of love is the one that'll help his brother with the enemy or their problem. I always say this and I stand firm by it. You have no right to never say nothing to nobody about what they do wrong if you're not willing to help them with the problem. You can't point out nobody's problem if you yourself aren't willing to go the extra mile and help somebody. See, because I noticed that people love to point out somebody's problem, tell somebody what they doing wrong, but when that person needs a ride to work at 5 in the morning, don't call me. You know, they need somebody to pick them up when they get off at 11:30 at night. But you quick to point the finger though. Like I said, if you're not willing to help in whatever it takes, then you have no right to criticize or point the finger. Beloved, we are all called to be watchmen. The people's blood God will require at our hands if we don't blow the trumpet. Babylon is falling. It's falling. And the days are getting worse and worse and worse. You'll be surprised who will listen to you when you blow your trumpet, especially when you're warning out of love. And you're not just warning. You're actually saying, "Look, I'll help you with whatever problem you got. We'll get through this together." You'll be surprised who you reach, or who the Holy Spirit reaches through you. Y'all have a good one.